Hey y'all, welcome back to Mirror Modal Dev. We are gonna continue on our path of working with Ollama like we did yesterday. This one's gonna be a pretty short one, but I wanted to kind of get into looking at something that came up during yesterday's stream that I've had a chance to look into and can kind of talk you through a little bit of what was going on. So if you weren't here yesterday, we were looking at Ollama and you know taking our first steps into running large language models locally on our machine using this CLI that Ollama provides, and then also using the REST API that it provides locally on your machine. And that's where the fun starts. So yesterday we got into some code. Let me go ahead and clear this out for a second. And at first, the code that we ran was generated by Claude, Anthropic's Claude, and it was on the surface looked okay, but when we ran it, we were having some problems with the JSON response from the Ollama API. And the reason why was that the generated code that Claude had provided was assuming we would get a JSON response when what we were actually getting was a stream from the Ollama API. So we talked to Claude about that, and then it spit out a bunch of other code. And towards the end, though, I looking at this, this is fine, but probably more complicated than I'd like to see for, just this light exploration that we're doing. And I had previously worked with some different code that I had said was a bit simpler, and I thought was better to get started with, and so that's what I wanted to show you. Before I jump in and show you that, though, let's go ahead and run this code from yesterday just to see. Did we have a start script? We don't, so we're going to just run node index.js. So I'll run this, and what it's going to do is talk to... it's going to talk to Llama 3.1, but let's change this to Tiny Llama. Tiny Llama is just a tiny LLM that will run faster on this machine. I'm running on a MacBook Air M2, which is passable for things, for LLMs, not super fast, but obviously running a smaller model helps with that. So here we go. We're going to do Tiny Llama, and we're going to have it explain the concept of recursion in programming. So let's just do this, and hopefully nothing's changed overnight. Yeah, so you can see without following along here, let me scroll back up. We did ran the script. It sent the request to Ollama, which is running locally on my machine, because you can see the endpoint here, right? This is just running on localhost. Ollama sets you up on this port in localhost by virtue of just installing Ollama. So this is just there, and you can call endpoints on it. The endpoint we're calling is generation or API/generate. Which does what it says on the 10. And then from there, you saw that it just streamed out a response that explains recursion in depth. So anyways, that's, how long you want it, and all of that kind of thing is a, function of how you prompt the LLM. And that's not really what we're going to get into here, though. I think the main thing to see is that, one, the function I wasn't super stoked about was using like this, this whole thing that basically boils down to we were streaming the response. So the code to handle that, that Claude generated was more complicated than I wanted to see. I mean, it's not insane, but it's, for a little demo, you want to see something that's a bit more concise. Okay, so what I wanted to do is switch over here to I made a temp file to compare the two functions. And in this function, all we're going to do is, this is just a made up function name, generate response with Ollama. We're going to do the same thing that we did in the other script, pass in a prompt and pass in the model name. So here we are going to do a try catch where we use fetch to call that same API endpoint /API/generate. It's a post, application.json, all the stuff, basic stuff. And then the body is a JSON object that has the model name, the prompt. Again, those things are just the arguments that we pass into this function. Notably, this is the thing that we're going to change here, right? Is stream is not going to be true. These other things are just like kind of there for playing with. We probably won't have time to get into that today, but I think we'll do more of that stuff maybe as early as tomorrow. For now, it's the fact that we're not going to stream that will make handling the response much simpler. So I think what Claude was doing was asking for a stream, and but trying to handle the responses if it was just a JSON object. So that's where we were getting caught up initially when we were erroring out. And when we fixed that, the way that Claude interpreted my request to fix it was to handle the stream. So as a new word is generated, it shows up in the terminal. Again, we want to keep it pretty simple though. So like you can see here that in the try, all we're doing is making a fetch request at the end of the day. It's just fetch request with the body. We handle any errors up front, and then assuming there was no error, then we handle the response. So we just do the await response.json, that's the data, and then we pass back data.response. And that's really it. That's all there is to it. So we have the helper function that we just talked through. This is generate response with Ollama. We're just going to call that. We're going to pass in that same prompt that we had in the previous script, and then we're also going to use the same model that I already have installed locally with Ollama. So instead of running index.js now, we're going to run this file, which is node temp.js. We'll run it, and you are not streaming, so we get to sit here and wait for a second, because it's all going to come in one chunk. Boom. And obviously, if what you're trying to do is, say, I don't know, build a chatbot or something that requires like fast response times to the user, this isn't what you want to do. But for just kind of having a basic demo that we're going to play around with, I didn't want to like have to kind of build on top of the stream handling stuff. And quite honestly, there may be better ways to do that anyways that we'll want to look into. So certainly we'll come back to the concept of streaming at some point, but for now, what I wanted to show you is you can ask this thing a question, let it think, and then get the entire answers. So just to say, for example, or to show, for example, that like this isn't some sort of like pre-baked thing. I don't know. Let's just play around with it. Explain the concept of recursion in, let's try dreams. And we'll run the script again. We get to wait for a minute, and then this comes up where it says recursion is a bah. Did I scroll up too high? Interesting. Earlier when I called it, I actually got... Oh, okay, wait, no, I see what it does. It's prepending, like, nice LLM. So it's prepending some information that is not entirely relevant to my question. It's just saying, well, in computer program, it's this, but maybe it's trying to tell me that you might have asked the wrong question, but and then it goes on to explain, in dreams, recursion occurs when subconscious thoughts or mental images call up or represent the same or similar ideas more than once. This is known as the illusion of recurrence. I asked it this question a little bit earlier, and it gives you different... Since it's an LLM, like you're not, not deterministic, you won't get the same answer every time. But yeah, I got some sort of interesting answers on this, which I thought were neat. So I don't know, this would be a fun one to sit here and read, but like that's not why we're here, so I won't sit and read it to you. But we can start to do sort of the quote unquote prompt engineering where we can start to try to dial it in a bit. It's like explain the concept of recursion and dreams in just a few sentences. And at this point, I'm just showing you things that you could probably already do in any LLM. And then you can just go on to say, like, I'm 5 years old. We'll see what it can do. So explaining, like, I'm 5 years old. Yeah, I don't buy I don't buy that some of this explanation is for 5 years old, but again, like that's the joy of prompt engineering. And also we're using Tiny Llama, right? So again, like there may be limitations, or certainly there'll be limitations and implications about the fact that we're using a much smaller model. We could chunk this in and do Llama 3.1, for example, which I have loaded. So if you kind of go back and look, we won't do that just because I don't want to sit here and wait on it. But if we use this command, let me clear this out. So use this command Ollama, which is just the CLI, and then we say list. We can actually see like what do we have, what LLMs do we have installed locally through Ollama, and you can see we've got Tiny Llama, Llama 3.1, Llama 2, and CodeStrel. Yeah, anyways, I just kind of wanted to show that there's a simpler way to handle the response from the Ollama API, which is just not to stream it. And there's nothing unique about this, by the way, because you can do this inside of OpenAI as well, like their API when you're working with GPT, like ChatGPT and the like. And I would just assume it's an option anywhere else. Just, stream, set it to false, and just wait for the response. Again, not a great user experience if what you're trying to do is produce an app that is kind of feels like it's talking. I don't know. Even as a user, I have to say sometimes the streamed responses I don't necessarily love. It's nice to see that there's like instant feedback in terms of like, okay, it's working on my question. At the same time, there is like, I feel like universal UX questions around like how to actually present that. I don't necessarily like how when Windows and apps just kind of scroll along with the responses, if I'm able to read as fast as the LLM is typing, I always end up like having to try to stop the screen somehow. Like if I'm on my phone, I'm like, no, stop moving it. So streaming comes with its own set of UX questions, but anyways, we're just doing a small demo, and we want to keep our code pretty simple in order to, kind of try a few different things without having to handle the complexities of streaming. And quite honestly, again, I think there's still work to be done in terms of how streamed responses are presented to users anyways. Okay, so far, once we've dug into Ollama, right, yesterday we installed it, we learned how to pull models down locally, and play around a little bit with the CLI, but then jump into Node.js and start calling Ollama over a local host port to generate responses that way. All of this has pretty much been done without looking anything up. We talked to Claude to generate some code. We had opinions about that code. We had Claude change it in some ways. There were more opinions, and then I wanted to go off and kind of noodle on it between streams. So I could show you the difference between these two, the streaming type of handler and the non-streaming type of handler, which we're looking at now. So probably at some point we start wondering, okay, great, but like, how do we actually learn about this API? And the fun part, as far as I can tell, you know what? It's great. As soon as I'm on a stream, I see where you can do this. I was looking all over this website for docs. I went into here I see it says search models, but I tried to just search for docs anyways, and that didn't work. There's a tiny little word down here that says docs. So that's where it is, and it looks like that's linking to GitHub. So I was just going to show you GitHub. So because ultimately what I ended up doing is just jumping over to the repo anyways, and just kind of searching for the word API on the repo, right? So you just go, you can see I just did it a minute ago. So here's where the API is in the code base, but if we keep on going and scrolling down, here we go, REST API. And the initial blurb, pretty concise, right? Ollama has a REST API for running and managing models. This is the API that we were using in Node.js. It's showing how to call it in curl, but you can see it's /API/generate. We passed in the model in the prompt. We also passed in some other optional properties like stream false and temperature and so on. Some of those things that we'll get into another time. But just even at a higher level, /API/generate isn't your only option. There's /API/chat. There's also an embeddings API in here as well. So if we click through to the documentation, which is, you can see here inside of the repo, it's at ollama/doc/API.md for Markdown. And you can see like it kind of talks you through all the endpoints. So there's some of the things that you would expect to be able to do with the CLI, like push and pull a model. At the code level, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about what I would do with that, but it's neat to know it's there, and maybe it's something we should think about. But a lot of what we're going to want to do with it, at least for for now in these streams is doing things where we're doing generation or completions, and probably embeddings as well if we get into doing some stuff like building a local RAG instance, which I 100% want to do at some point on the stream. So anyways, all I really wanted to show here is that the docs are here. They're on the website. There's the tiniest of words that says docs, and I just didn't notice it until we got on, but searching through the GitHub repo turns them up very quickly anyways. And, so one of the cool things, by the way, is you can start out by just even looking at the naming conventions for the models. So let's just go back into VS Code for a second, and I'm going to do Ollama list one more time. You'll notice that I have the Tiny Llama : latest, Llama 3.1 : latest, and the like. But the reality is there are a lot of other permutations that you could potentially do around how many billions of parameters or what the quantization is, that kind of stuff. We might dig into that a bit. One of the things that I think could potentially be interesting there is just simply like, if you're gonna be running something where you need to test your own code and you don't want to be waiting forever on a response, like maybe while you're in dev mode, you use a very light model so that you're not waiting around for responses. But maybe in real life, the wait time, for your use case may not matter as much on your local machine, depending on what you're doing. And so when you're not running in dev mode, you're in quote unquote prod, then you can swap out the model to something much bigger that will take more time to get a response. So I don't know, there's some things like that immediately come to mind when I think about it, but more than anything, it's highly likely that when you get started with Ollama, like you just pull a bunch of models. Like for me here, it doesn't look like I have very many models. I mean, I only have 4 pulled here, but I have a Mac Studio sitting next to me that's much more powerful. We've got a lot more options available to me there. There are just some models that just aren't going to run on a MacBook Air of any kind. So what's the point in pulling them? Because they're huge. But probably what you end up doing when you get started with Ollama is just play with the CLI. Like we did yesterday, pull a bunch of models and see like which ones are kind of like suitable for your use case. And also it's just kind of fun to play around with. That all gets to the point that like, there's going to be different flavors of Llama 3.1 or Llama 2, for example, or any of these really. And so like you may have some where you're not calling : latest, but you're calling : 7 billion, like 7B versus 3B or whatever. So it's good to know that that's a possibility. And it may actually have practical implications for like how you set up your development environment. So I think that may be where we stop for today. It was really just a chance to show you the difference between streaming a response from Ollama and not streaming one, and then how to actually start getting into the API documentation. But the fact that we got this far and didn't really ever look at API docs is pretty interesting, isn't it? There's just a lot we can get to, and kind of have something up and running, even if it is just a Node.js script, pretty quickly without really digging into a lot of the details under the hood. But as is often the case, like it feels good to like get started and get a quick win in, but like we actually do eventually want to get to the details under the hood because there's really cool stuff to do. So I expect that in the coming days we'll continue to jam on this whole Ollama idea and play around with it and start to build something up that isn't just a hard-coded prompt that is returning text into your terminal. We'll want to do a little more, and we'll continue to hack away at it. Anyways, today was a pretty quick stream. Just wanted to get this in there as a continuation of yesterday, and we'll pick back up most likely tomorrow on a similar theme and go from there. Thanks for tuning in to Mirror Modal Dev. I hope this is proving useful to you. Feel free to reach out if you have any feedback or anything like that. This is only the 4th day of the stream, so it's super early days and there's a lot to improve upon. And I'd also love your ideas of things to explore, and we can just kind of jump in and explore it live. All right, take care. Have a great day.